What a fast Friday we have had here at the Nürburgring for the 50th anniversary running of the 24 hours. Well, it's pitch black outside now, so we're getting some idea of how quickly we're going to be into the dark when we go racing tomorrow into Sunday. But we have now got the grid for the 2020 event. Hello, everybody. I'm John Hindhaugh, and on AudiOnTrack.com, we're in the Audi Sports Studio, and joining me to try and make some sense of what we've seen today, we've got Alan McNish and Frank Beeler. Alan, first of all, what do you make of today? It was the typical Nürburgring day with a bit of everything as far as the weather was concerned.
It certainly was. It was very cold for a start. Also, the rain came in. There was suspected rain going to come right at the end of qualifying, which didn't appear. And there was all that sort of intrepidation, I would have said, in picking the right tyre choice. And this evening for the final qualifying and the grid positions, it was all about that right tyre choice for those 2 laps. And ultimately, some got it right. Somebody didn't quite get it right.
And Frank, we saw everything out there. From a full slick to a cut slick to a full wet, and pretty much everything that the guys could try in between. There was no consensus of opinion there.
I think it was actually a little taste of what we can see tomorrow probably as well. You have to be spot on with your weather people. You have to know what's going on out there to make the right tire choice, and it's very, very difficult. And if you are on the wrong tire, that's what we saw in top qualifying now. It's very, very easy to lose 10-20 seconds per lap, and this should not happen tomorrow.
I was going to say, just sorry, one thing. When I actually watched it, I was thinking, crikey, it's so difficult for them to go out because they're venturing into the unknown. If those that went out on the cut slick or the slick tyre, for them it was just so critical, as you know, Frank, to try to get some temperature or keep some temperature, because they come out the tyre blank is 80 degrees. But by the time they go onto the big circuit, they'll already be cooling down, and that means that you're going to be in a very difficult position.
And the big problem was that, especially at the beginning of the circuit, Grand Prix and Hatzenbach, Fuchsröhre, so the first part was still damp and wet, and by the time you reach the dry part, the temperature is not there anymore, and it doesn't work out then.
Talk about the front of the grid at the moment, but let's talk about the Audis. Mirko Bortolotti, Alan, cracking lap, best of the Audis. It's only 11th, but for a guy that doesn't have a huge amount of experience around here, he's really set his stamp on this one, hasn't he?
Yeah, he has. He's came into it, and he actually was the fastest Audi, as you say, 11th, but it was a very, very strong lap. He pieced it together very well, very difficult conditions, even changing during the lap as well from what it was the previous lap by drying up in some areas, getting wetter in others. And so in that respect, I think it was a strong performance. But it was also, I would have said, a performance where you're very much balancing risk and reward, because clearly you could really go for it to get, a faster lap time. But the risk of it going wrong round here, as you know, is very, very treacherous.
Yeah, you don't want to have a big off, of course, in qualifying. So it's very difficult, and especially under these conditions. You have to try to make your way through the qualifying, and unfortunately, with the probably wrong tire choice, you are where you are. But still, I think we are in a good position, and let's see what the first few hours will bring tomorrow.
I'm not sure what the collective noun for Audi R8 LMS GT3 Rs, but we've got a group of them together on the grid, the 4 rings of Audi perhaps, with those guys together. Will there be some chatting between the teams for the start of the race? Because the last thing you want to do is start getting in each other's way, or worse, in the first couple of corners of the Grand Prix track.
Yeah, certainly the last thing you do need is exactly that, is cars coming together. Even though they're in separate teams, it's still under the big hand of Audi Sport in that respect. And clearly, very professional drivers, very professional teams, very aware that, you've got to first finish before you finish first. And in that respect, I think they'll also be taking it a little bit more carefully at the start, especially if the weather is something like we had today.
Well, if it's up and down, Frank, really, I mean, obviously, all the guys said that we spoke to today, we want to be somewhere in the top 10. They're just outside. But given the roll of the dice that could be the weather, I don't think it's as bad as people might look at and say, well, hang on, the first Audi's only 11th. That actually isn't as bad as it looks.
It's going to be a long race, and as we mentioned before, we will probably be 10, 11 hours in the dark. in very difficult weather conditions. So I think it's not so important where you are at the start. It's important that you have a good strategy, that all the drivers get the routine, and I think then it can work out. So you have to make sure you bring the car through the night. Very often we saw early in the morning some crashes, and that's what you have to avoid. And then, especially because on Sunday weather forecast is dry, so if you bring it over the night, through the night, then the race starts Sunday morning.
Well, I'm sure be talking an awful lot about tyres again through the race, Alan. The mere fact that we're in September instead of May, June or July, which are the normal months that this race runs, means that probably as far as slicks are concerned, there is only one choice, because it will be the softest of the slick because of the temperature range in which that tyre works.
Yeah, just to sort of clarify, we do have tyre options available. So you have a soft, medium and a hard compound. And that doesn't mean to say necessarily the compound works in that. It's actually relative to the track temperature. And so the hotter it gets, the more you step up. And
so that's really cold, medium and hot.
Yeah,
in that
it should
respect.
actually be named in that respect. It'd be easier to understand. But what you do is you check the track temperature, and if it's above or below a defined temperature point, that's when you step up or down on the range. And with it being very cold, as you said, September, and also, to be honest, it was quite bitterly cold today, then you would be erring towards the softer of the compounds. But that's also the same for the wets as well, because we have got different options on wets, for a wet that goes into a drying condition, or also very heavy, like a monsoon type condition. But again, it is very much dependent whether you can get the energy and the temperature into the tyre and then keep it, is whether it's the right one for you, which may also not necessarily be reflected across with other car manufacturers either. So what's right for Audi may not necessarily be right for someone else.
Well, let's talk about how the race might pan out, because at the front of the field, there was a fabulous qualifying for a Ferrari driver. Luca did a great job. Lucas Ludwig did a fantastic job. It's a name that's very well known around here, of course, and puts the Octane 126 car on second position. I think if there was an upset anywhere, that was the upset. I don't think anybody expected. He kind of stealthed his way to that front.
Yeah, actually, that's true. I mean, we followed his lap on screen, and he was doing really, really well. Actually, very close to pole position, of course. So there was a possibility. I think the last one or two sectors, he lost a bit of time, but he did a great job. Honestly, I expected him under the first top 10, but not that far in front.
And is that down to just reading the conditions better, Alan, because it was such a lottery there? Or have you got to give the driver some credit for that?
Oh, you always have to give the driver credit. Being an ex-driver, you clearly always have to do that. But as well, the driver has to be given the car, the tyre, the setup, everything to allow him to do the job, and then he's got to execute it. And I don't think there's anybody in qualifying that did a bad job here. It's such a long and difficult lap in difficult conditions, and he did an extremely good one. There was a point, like Frank said, where he was doing purple sectors all the way through the middle of the lap, but this was on his second lap on those tyres. And I actually think at the end, the Ferrari maybe used them a little bit more aggressively, and it dropped off, because he really dropped off in the last 2-3 sectors, which was the difference ultimately between pole and second. But second's still a very, very good performance.
I've watched you two race Audis and Audis racing all over the world for a very, very long time, more time than I would probably like to admit. What I know is, because I've heard it said, you learn more when you're not winning than you're winning. It wasn't a winning day totally today, so what needs to be done, if anything, for tomorrow? What lessons have been learned, if anything, Frank, for tomorrow? What plans can be constructed?
Yeah, getting tire choice right, being always in contact with your engineers and with the weather people and so on, and trying to figure out what you need at the right time. You know, it's always a kind of a gamble, but you have to make sure you are out there with the right tire at the right time. Then it's possible to go further in front.
The guys are still next door and will be for some time in mission control, as we've dubbed it. It's the engineering facility, actually. They're poring over data. What sort of conversations will be going on there, and how will that filter down to the engineers in the pit garages and subsequently the drivers?
Well, it is to understand exactly what the guidelines are that you can learn from qualifying. You know, when you can go on to X tyre or Y tyre, or what the options could be for us as Audi, not other people, just purely you focus now on yourself and your own team. And in that particular point, I think we've got to keep in mind a couple of extra factors. One, as Frank said, the night is going to be significantly longer. But the other thing, in these cold and drying conditions, there are significantly less cars on track. There's 90 cars instead of the normal 150 plus. So with 150 cars, you dry the circuit much quicker than you do if you've only got 90. So that will have an effect as well on the strategy of when you would maybe go from a wet tyre onto a slick tyre and these type of situations. That's the type of things that as well they're thinking about in the background.
And I should point out as well that there are no tyre rules in terms of how many tyres you can use. Normally, even if you have got a series that does that, wet tyres for reasons of safety aren't included. But you can throw as many tyres at it wet or dry as you want here at the Nürburgring. So if you want to change every time you come into the pits, you can. So you can make those adjustments. We've got a warm-up tomorrow, Alan. Put your team...
Well, first of all, do you think it's going to be very warm in the warm-up?
Sorry.
Or should we call it a cold-up?
Right, OK. We have some running before we go to the grid tomorrow. I'm not going to call it a warm-up. You're absolutely right. Put your team principals hat on right now. Are you talking to the engineers with a view to making any significant changes to the setups of the car and try that out in warm-up?
No. I think right now, you know the car. We know the car very well. It's done a lot of races, endurance races. It's won here before in the past. It won last year. And so in that respect, it's about just the detail. In reality, in the warm-up, it's such a different condition situation that I think it's important just to run through, the driver, just make sure that everything's functioning. Because, if you haven't got it worked out now, it's a gamble and a guess. And we're not into gambling guessing, we're into prediction and logical prediction, which is something that's based on experience. And that experience is sometimes not reacting to situations as much as having to react to situations.
So basically what we're saying here, hold your nerve. We know that Audi R8 LMS GT3 is a good car around here. Don't try and chase the track as it was today. Work out what it needs to be doing tomorrow.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I'm absolutely positive. As Alan just said, they do have the experience, and it's kind of fine-tuning, let's say, to make it work for the race. And I do not have any kind of worries. I mean, they have to analyze now why and what happened in qualifying. There are a few things in mind. It's the tire choice, tire pressure, and so on. And I'm pretty sure tomorrow at the start we will be sorted out very well, and it will work, no problem.
We've seen it so many times in the past. Alan, you're going to be leaving us in the studio here. What are you going to be doing tomorrow?
Well, to be honest, I'm going to be doing what I've always wanted to do, is to go and look at this race effectively as a fan, but with a camera and a microphone, and to understand a little bit about that background, behind-the-scenes area of it, and to get that sort of extra little feel that normally I wouldn't have the opportunity to do, because normally I'm sitting, certainly in my role now within Audi, from our Formula E programs, I'm sitting with the headset on in the stressful situation that Chris Renke and the guys are doing right now. So I've maybe got a little bit more relaxed time, but it'll be an enjoyable one.
You know that there's no food stands here this year, so you can't nick off and get a little bit of currywurst and frites. You know that, don't you?
Yeah, but I may have stocked up on the way here, though.
Oh, okay.
There is a chance to get some, huh?
You know where it is, Frankie. I'll follow you.
If anybody knows, Frank will. Our first show tomorrow from the Audi Sports Studio live will be at 11 o'clock. But that's 11 o'clock Central European Summer Time. But before that, we've got a bit of a Billy bonus for you. As you know, some of our Audi Sport and Audi customer racing drivers are competing this weekend at Zandvoort on the coast of Holland. Their race is being pulled forward to allow those guys to get away and join this race at a reasonable time tomorrow afternoon. And so we will have live coverage of the race from Zandvoort tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock Central European Summer Time. That's 8 o'clock in the UK. Another Radio Show Limited voice, Bruce Jones, will be leading the commentary with John Watson, of course, alongside him on the international feed. And that's right here on AudiOnTrack.com. And then we're back at 11 o'clock to start the build-up to the 50th running of the Nürburgring 24 hours. I hope you've enjoyed what we've done for you today. It's been a bit of an explaining day, bringing you in to what we'll be doing for the rest of the weekend. It's all action again tomorrow and right through to the checkered flag on Sunday. Hope you'll want to spend some of your weekend with us. From Alan, from Frank and me, John Hindhaugh, and the whole technical team here have done a cracking job today. Thanks for joining us. Have a good evening, and we'll see you tomorrow bright and early for that race from Zandvoort, 9 Central European time. Bye-bye.